discussion now.
Hi, your eyes. Or I just had cataracts.
I'm blurry near and blurry far. Looking at the sermon giver, the window behind is so bright I couldn't.
Okay, so
I really wish it
okay.
thing to block some of this.
It doesn't last too long.
I don't know how this is.
Well, I can't wait till I get new glasses that actually instead of trying to
And it's kind of a wonky. So Esther and I invited her back to concert. Next Saturday. Okay.
I never run in Pennsylvania. Yeah, I suppose it was PJ at the
Yes.
when we went to see him.
And then I went to see most of the kids. I went to see the kids. And that was very gratifying. I'm glad that I went.
The baby, a toddler.
It was,
1-year-old.
there was no state.
So, yes, motivates, moves around.
So my
And stands with aid, but doesn't quite move. That'll be the next thing.
Okay, but then also, Christian get lumped a lot. Because I didn't know if it's what? Okay. That sounds good. Well, yeah, and I didn't know if there needed to be one person for each. I did the choir. Oh, yes.
We're preparing for a concert on the 19th. And our songs, you know, when I think of Indians, you know,
Yes.
there's nothing. I mean, it's all. They're all easy songs. But they're fun. We're improving this depression. It's gonna be good.
This may be all that's coming, so I can hear myself mic'd, so I know I'm on. Before we get started, I want to thank Jerry for taping these things. I was not able to be here last weekend, but it was important for me to know what was going on. And so I did listen to the whole broadcast. And it was a good discussion, really healthy discussion last week. So I'm glad I did that. It also, you covered some things I was going to cover today. So that was helpful to me. That reminds me, however, that the broadcast was effective only when you were holding your mic. If anybody who was not holding the mic, we didn't hear a thing. Or if they, yeah, you got to hold the mic. So Catherine, if you could grab the mic behind you. Catherine's the mic master.
see far away to drive.
Okay. With that, let's open with a prayer. God, as we continue our discernment process, give us the strength and courage to share our opinions honestly and openly, the power to listen to others and to be tolerant of other ideas, and the wisdom to discern a positive direction as a result of our discussion. Amen. So I have produced a kind of a guide. This is not a questionnaire, and it's just meant to be discussion topics that I wanted to be sure to cover. It does not mean to be limiting. If you have ideas that are not covered by this outline, share them anyway. It's a good-sized group to do that. A reminder again to please pass the mic around to the next person who's going to speak. Otherwise, we don't accomplish that. A matter of introduction, the reason we're doing this on growth is that when we did the CAT survey, they asked us the respondents to, out of 17 possible priorities that we could spend our energy on, they said, identify your top priorities. And in this church, in this congregation, the top 2 priorities both had to do with growth. So it apparently is a priority for us. As
it is with every other church in their survey, just about.
I strongly believe that we are not the only organization, not the only church that responded with their 2 top priorities being growth. It is obviously, it's an obvious thing, but it's something that apparently the congregation wants us to spend some time on. So that's why we're doing it today. The second thing I wanted to point out before we get started with the discussion is that although we have lost a few members this last couple of years due to death and attrition, moving away and that kind of thing, we also have picked up 2 or 3 new pledging units. In fact, we're doing the budget right now and identified there are 2 additional people, not people, but pledging units that have pledged this year that have never pledged before. So we are doing something right. Our growth is, I just don't know that without some concerted effort that we can keep that up. That it's not a big priority for us and get some direction how to do it. So, are there any opening comments before we get into the topics? Okay, well, the first topic is there a realistic preferred demographic we should target? And do you have any specific ideas on how to target that particular specific demographic? And do you understand what I mean by demographic?
Age.
Jim?
Well, I'll just start things off by saying I personally can't think of any specific demographic that we should target because I think a church just sort of grows organically and you serve the people who are faithful. And so that sort of identifies who we are, and who we are in one generation may not be the same, a decade later. And so I really can't say I would prefer any particular demographic because that reminds me of the ones we would be omitting. And so I wouldn't want to omit anybody. That's a tough question. So I don't really feel like, I'm personally not excited about the idea of targeting a particular demographic.
I should say that the answer no is a perfectly acceptable answer to this question.
I'll give an opposing viewpoint for the sake of discussion here. I think I'd be interested in us thinking more about how to reach out to other people who are older, retired, not raising young families. I think that's the kind of community we have here, and when you come into a church, you're looking for people like you, other people with kids. That's not going to happen here, and I think we'd be wasting our energy to try to establish those kinds of conditions. And we've already transformed the kid care room downstairs. I mean, it's just reality. But I think there probably are a lot of people who are older, who are more in the grandparent age than that might be looking for ways of meaningfully interacting and having a stronger spiritual life that we could reach out to. So I don't know how much that really contradicts what Jim is saying, but to give us another way of looking at it.
Thank you, Nancy. As a personal comment, I'm at an age now where anybody who's in their late 50s and early 60s is a young person. So,
I didn't need the end of that, but
is it anyone who's in their late 50s or early 60s is a young person to me. So, I don't think we ought to market, if we market to people who are 75 and up like me. I think we ought to be looking for people who are still, as Nancy said, retired, ready for a community like this, who are looking for a community like this that is open to other people and so on. Who I really think that's that's the preferred demographic in my view. Not that we should turn away somebody who is in a rest home, but what if we're going to market to somebody, I think it should be the younger old.
I think it's interesting in both your comments because I don't know how many of you, this is not gossip, this was given information outright, but Tanya English is a member of this neighborhood. And she explained to me that it is a distance for her to go to her normal church, and that her mother-in-law always said, as you get older, you got to find a neighborhood church. So I wonder if we did a canvas of the neighborhood, because there's a lot of people who are our age. We have that whole senior center over there. Maybe if we did a visible go over with cookies and stand there and talk about, I don't know, but just stick to this area. If young people come, hey, great. But I'm looking at winter here in Iowa, which I haven't done in 10 years, and to drive even from my house, and I'm not that far away, but there are people in this, as I look around here, who are really coming from a distance to come to our wonderful church, but it's hard in the winter.
Can I
Thank you,
just
Chris.
say that that sign out front looks so nice about our service for Christmas Eve. I don't know who to thank.
Jim, did you put that together, the Christmas Eve?
No, Jerry did.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Jerry.
I think a lot of retirement communities are so organized with so many activities. They're almost providing a community in lieu of a church. But there are a lot of retired and older people who are not in a retirement community that probably are quite lonely and don't have a community. And I think we need to find ways to include, provide community for people that don't have a residential community.
That makes a lot of sense to me, I agree, but I would also add that I have conversations in the hospital with people who are living in retirement communities who say, yes, there's a service at fill in the blank, but it's not my tradition. And they'll go, but they'd be much happier to go to something that's their tradition and they don't have transportation. So I think if we're thinking about that, even close by, maybe not across the street, but in this neighborhood, we still, I think, need to be prepared to find people who are willing to pick up someone every Sunday and bring them.
It's a little bit of a conflict to target a specific group of people and say we're going to focus on adults or something like that, and then turn around and say, no, we're going to focus on a neighborhood, because one is age-related and the other is area-related. And they don't overlap too well, and the minute you start saying we're going to focus on our area or our neighborhood, then people of all ages live in the neighborhood. So you'll end up targeting to everybody in the neighborhood, no matter what their age is. So that's one of the problems of targeting.
I'm going to throw away the word target. I think it has a bad connotation, like we're going after and putting bullseyes on people. I think we can look at both of those, and it can be an even and, not an even or in our binary society. I think we can, I believe we're just looking at suggestions now for a vision board or something for later on. And I think both of those can be looked at, not again as a target, but as a thought process to think about certain people.
I agree with Chris that we don't need to limit ourselves to one target. Oh, I've got a mic. Thanks, Polly. When we identify demographics, the emphasis is on the S. That Nancy had some great points, and Chris had a great point about the neighborhood. It's a matter of where do we devote our energies, and how do we go about it. I've so far heard two specific examples that we can pass on to the discernment committee in its focus, and that one of them is to canvass the neighborhood and see if there are available people who would like a church, and the other is to provide transportation to people who are in rest homes or other places that might need transportation. Those are specific ideas that we can pass on. Are there others?
I think, Chris, I agree with you, and I think a way to avoid the metaphor of target is the opposite direction, is just being open to and aware that these are areas and populations that we might pay special attention if they come to us. And that's what I meant about being prepared to offer transportation. It's being open to and looking out for, kind of.
I wasn't going to talk a lot, but for those of you who don't know, I am taking over the care team. And my biggest concern is transportation. From our point of view of helping people who are struggling to get into vehicles, or at my age, folding up a wheelchair and putting it into my vehicle, that is, I don't think a liability for the church. I don't know. But it is a moral liability in my mind. And I would hate to have someone fall on the ground and break a hip, because that's where we're all going. I'm sorry, but we are. Or me hurt myself. Yeah. So in that committee, I am not going to drive. So it's great to have an idea, and I don't mean that we would have to look at, can we rent a van? I don't know, because we don't have people who are super young, but the churches who bring people from a distance all have a vehicle and they all have a driver. And so I don't know, but that's just a conflict problem with the being a driver or transporting people.
I'm not exactly sure what my friend's church did, but she was telling me that this summer they had an event at the Lutheran church on the corner of, is it Mormon Trek? Is it our Mormon Trek and, okay, Christ the King. And it was like a welcoming gathering. And they made popcorn. I'm not sure what else they had. But a lot of the people from, is it Pheasant Ridge? Yeah. Several people who were of other nationalities, they came, and it just sounded like a wonderful event. And I thought, oh, I wish we could do something like that we could actually have it out on our new patio or maybe something in the back. But you know, I mean, I think it's really hard to go door to door and say, we're looking to get people to come to our church. But if we'd have a sign out for a couple of weeks or so, try to get a feel of the weather, and if it was bad, we could come inside, but just have some kind of, I can certainly pick Barb's brain about what exactly they did, but these women came and they brought food from their country, you know, that they would make in their home country, and she said it was just wonderful. And I thought, oh, that would be a good start. We may not get new people, but they would see who we are and that we are welcoming, and I don't know. It's a
We
thought.
tried that, but it's been a while.
We've really tried that neighborhood kind of thing, and I think it's going to take some personal invitations and something more than just ringing a doorbell or putting up a sign, because we did a whole pig roast one year, you know, and it was an elaborate and very well prepared, and nobody came. So I do think it's a matter of finding ways to invite, and rather than just post a welcome thing.
Chris has done Easter eggs.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the hope with the Easter egg hunt, was to have children in the area, which didn't ever come out. But, so that was my little attempt at trying, but I think if we spent time as an organized group, I think this neighborhood is getting older, that maybe they need to be asked again. I mean, how long ago was that pig roast? 15, you know? So, anyway, I'm going to be quiet.
I'm just going to say I like the idea of going over there and with cookies and standing around and having conversation with people.
You should anticipate.
Mike Master?
You should anticipate that there's a woman over there who did belong to this church and was quite active and left us for something more traditional for her, I suppose. So I don't know if she tried to do any of this when she was a member, but it's an angle you need to consider.
Are you saying you think that she would not be helpful at all? I'm thinking that she is not against our church, and personally knowing a resident there, she would have access to guest rooms. I went to an origami session that she led there, and there were a couple people from the church here, and there were a couple people from the apartment there. And if you plan some kind of activity that's not necessarily like, we want you to know our church, we want you to come to our church, but here's a fun activity that we do and that we would do together with you. And we might be able to get her to lead another origami session or something like that. Or other kinds of crafts activities.
Sorry, Esther had mentioned she just went to something and they did painted rocks in between conversations. You know, and what a great thing. They, you know, got their rocks, which our church is big on rocks, you know, and you know, paint some of them, you know, but that, I mean, yeah, that's an idea. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you all for a good discussion on that. We'll pass those ideas on to the discernment committee, who then can pass them on to the vestry for consideration about going on for membership. Let's go on to topic number 2, and we don't have to spend a lot of time on this. You did spend time last week on discussing what changes you'd like to see in the service, and there was a pretty full and fair discussion about that. But what I wanted to cover was, is there anything that we can do as a church, not necessarily only with the service, but anything that we can do with the church that can make it more attractive to new people. And my thought is, when they come in, you know, if we somehow get them in the door, but once they're here, is there something that we can do to change that would make it more attractive to other new people? Jim?
I don't know why I did this, but for the last 6 months, like from maybe June until September or October at least, I carefully watched how many people who were visiting did, in fact, cross the threshold of the front door and walk in on a Sunday morning. And in 6 months, I don't think there were more than 2. So for me, the problem is outside, not inside. And the problem is familiarity, not necessarily what we do. We're a good group of people. We have a good service. It's a service that's been in operation for about 1,000 years. I don't know if that's a bad thing, but there's nothing wrong with what we do. It's just that nobody comes to visit. So how do you address that problem? So we need to be promoting our church somehow, and I'm not saying exactly how. I think Peg's idea is a very good one, and I would really recommend to all of us that we not say, oh, we tried that once and it didn't work, so we'll never do it again, because there's a limited number of things we can do. And if you cut yourself off before you even start, that's not a good way to reach the world.
When we had Chuck Coulter here, he was in charge of growth, and there were several things he did. I don't know how much they helped, but we had signs on the buses. We had materials at the Welcome Center out there in Carlville on the I-80. There's a visitor welcome center, if you've never noticed, across there from River Landing. I don't know what else he did.
Well, I was just thinking about what Jim said about getting them through the door. Do they need to come through the door? We have some nice areas just within our own grounds. We've got the garden, and we've got the top of our ramp now. And there are few enough of us that we could crowd in and look like a real crowd to have actual services outside when the weather is good. People might, in the neighborhood, might take notice that, oh, there's something going on there. Let's look at those people. What do they look like? You know, what are they doing that looks inviting or interesting or something I want to find out more about? Or maybe it's not, you know, our Sunday service, but a smaller service like, I'm not saying that Taizé would be necessarily something that people walking by would, they might be curious about it, but something more verbal or a little more active on a weekday that's not necessarily a church service. We're just there, and people are walking by and seeing we're doing something. And they can try to figure it out or come to check it out. Got a comment?
Yeah, I guess along with what Esther's saying, I think we really need to think about what it is that a church has to offer people. And I think, you know, our value added, what we have is helping to show how life is meaningful and in the different stages of our lives, kind of in a very universal sense of, you know, maybe offering something like, well, what do you want your funeral service to be like? You know, let's plan that ahead. And Laura might have some ideas of people who are really sick in the hospital and the kinds of things they need that they haven't thought about until they end up there. So I'm kind of thinking about those different stages or events of life where you really want to turn to a church to get the full profundity of what's happening. And I'm also thinking about our time in history and the 4 years we have ahead and what we can add to people's lives that might otherwise be missing or be chipped away at over these next 4 years. Don't have a real idea of that for an example, but those are some of along the lines what I'm thinking would be effective at reaching out to people.
Many years ago, the thing that attracted me to the church, one of the things, the big thing was the singing, because I'm heavily influenced by music, but the thing that really got me and had me coming back was to look around and realize after a few sessions here, a few weeks here, that this community is about 30 to 40% gay and lesbian. And I thought, my goodness, what a welcoming church this must be. What an open-armed church. That's the kind of thing I think that we can do, and we can market somehow. I don't know how to market something like that, but we can make it known to people that we are an accepting, open arms, come unto me kind of place to be for life events that you talk about. Sorry.
Yeah. I was just thinking, I mean, are there any religious services for, not a gender reveal, but I'm transitioning my gender, and I want to do that in, a thoughtful, meaningful, spiritual way that's also kind of an up yours to the evangelical. But anyway.
And
To really have the spirit of queer.
yes, well, yes, exactly, and that's what, I mean, that fits right in many ways with what I was going to say, is that we should ask ourselves, why do people come to church? And Lori Erickson said one time, a lot of people decide they want to become healers when they themselves already have a disease but don't know it yet, which I found rather eerie at the time. But I mean, that happens. People come, they feel like they should be going to church. They don't know why. So people come when they sense a possible problem or end coming, when they have a family crisis, when they come when a very important holiday comes up, and they think about how they went with their family to Christmas, or how they went to Easter with other people, what they did on Palm Sunday. I mean, if we just let some of these things be known somehow, I'm not sure how the somehow is, but that would make a big difference.
Okay, from my perspective at the back of the room. When people come through the threshold of this place, I think we have to be cognizant of how much they want to be paid attention to at the beginning. Because we have a tendency, I think it's good to be welcoming and friendly, but sometimes we have a tendency to corner them, and I'm guilty of this too. And you have to be able to learn how to read a person that's coming in the front door, how close or how much they want to be private and how much they want to feel this on their own. And now that we've done the banner out front, I know how that works. And I've made some comment to Jane that it's not that expensive. The banner cost me $63 to have made, and I pay for my designer to design it. And there's a $50 fee through the city of Coralville to hang that, because it's considered a temporary sign. So for 30 days, you can renew it every 30 days for another $50. But for $110, that's cheap advertising. I don't know, when you're you're talking about prospecting, which I do for a living. And how do you prospect for a church? And the other part, we have great ideas. We've always had great ideas from the very beginning of time. But who does all the work is about the ones sitting around this circle now. And how do you do this so that not everybody, also sitting in the back of the church, you start to realize how many people do the same things many Sundays in a row, you know? And that's also part of the growth conversation, to get some growth so that maybe you have a few more people doing a few more things. But that also then plays into this whole discernment about what we want from a priest and how much some of that may be delegated to a priest to help organize or to keep going and all those kinds of things. I also agree with Nancy. I think what's going to be coming down the pike in the next 4 years is going to be terrifying. And what Cindy just said about people come when they're in a panic. And the other thing is we've hid who we really are under a bushel for a long time. There are a lot of people that are very cognizant of not wanting to be, they're afraid that if we're out there being too open and affirming or whatever, that also could then be a dangerous thing for other fringe lunatics to come in and cause havoc. At this stage of life, I don't think I care about that. If I'm a martyr by some gunman, so be it. Just say something nice at a memorial, and or not nice, I don't care. And because I won't be there, I'm going to come haunt you if you don't say anything nice. But there's a lot of aspects here that all tie in to all these conversations that we've had. And one would be a new priest that can help organize some of these things and keep a consistent flow of the ideas that we have. We're great thinkers, and for the most part, we're really great planners, sometimes totally by accident, but that's sometimes the best organic way. And so I think that's all part of the discernment about what we're looking for in the next person. Because we're an amazing bunch of God's odds and ends, without a doubt. And what we've accomplished with the few astounds me every day. You know, I do my little gig in the back. Yeah, I can get a fun sign made pretty easily because of my connections with what I do. But some of the activities that the rest of you do day to day, not my wheelhouse. And that's what we need to promote. That's what we do and what we've accomplished.
Thank you, Jerry.
I'll pass it on. Yeah. I really appreciate Jerry. But a couple of conversations I wanted to add to. So Nancy, at the Gay Pride event, one of the churches had a naming ceremony for people as they transition, want to assume a new name. Maybe that's the kind of ceremony you might be thinking of. And I think that could happen outdoors. Also about people's impression when they first come in. We have an anteroom here. We have the coat room. Could we have our ushers there greet people when they first come in and, you know, talk to people as much as they appeared to want to talk and tell them the sanctuary is silent, you know, once it gets to be, or say the sanctuary will be silent for the 10 minutes before the service starts. So everybody has that expectation, but there's a little bit separate area for greetings and conversation. A lot of other things we've got comments on. I'll pass it on.
All right, pass it around. Every now and then it comes up somewhere that I am reminded of my friend Nancy Lee Zizi, who was active at Christ Church, Cedar Rapids and in the diocese. And she used to say, the way churches grow is that individual members know an individual who's in crisis and they invite them to church.
So we can't really, within kind of the routine of our Sundays together, express ourselves about what this church means. But you can do that in writing. And I shared an idea with Elizabeth long ago that those of us who had, I like the written word, and I use it a lot, but it just seems to me that if we wrote down some of the things that were exciting for us, and maybe we'd have an open letter somehow in the front, or something where we could or they could be made, if we have a number of people do that, then the letters that people wrote could be open to anybody in the congregation, and they could take one and send it to somebody that they knew, that they thought would find that point of view appealing. But I do really think that it's too hard to really engage in a deep and meaningful kind of verbal conversation. But I think the words are there, and I think that, and it wouldn't have to be a page long. It could just, if we could just get the comments of people about what being here means to them, and then find a way. And I don't know what it would be, because that would really take some thought, not to be obnoxiously in people's faces, but some way then to be able to make them either available to everyone here so that they could all read them, and if there's something that struck them that would be an idea about church that would be meaningful to someone they knew, they could take that and pass it on, or send it to somebody, or think about it themselves. I just do think that we need to use people's ideas in writing to be able to get things across, and how to transfer that to them is a bigger challenge, but that's...
In looking back, I remember that the Spirit School is a good example of that. This lady right here invented the idea. So we're doing something that Polly thought of several years ago, and it's turned out to be very successful. But there's a second step, though, involved between the idea and the realization of an idea, and that's planning and work. And what I see is that the idea of just self-promotion is non-existent at the moment. There's no committee, there's no overreaching plan, there's no inventory of a number of different ways that you could reach out to the community. Nothing is written down, it's just whatever you feel like at the moment, and that's not a very good way to proceed. So I would really like to see, following this committee, maybe through the vestry or something, a reorganization of a growth group, a growth committee, and start to inventory all of the possible ways that we can reach out to the community, put that all down on paper, and then actually implement several of those ideas throughout the year so that something gets done, and gets done systematically and continually. And that's going to help. Okay.
Small thing, it strikes me that taking little snippets from those kinds of statements and using them in ads would be an immediate thing. Yeah.
That's a great transition to our next topic.
I have one more thing I just wanted to pick up on what Nancy said about the next 4 years. A number of people I know were seriously distressed in the day after the election, and we just next day brought people to sit around the fire, and I was struck by how healing and necessary, not necessarily healing, cathartic and necessary that felt for the people that were there. And we intended to keep doing it, but the weather was crappy the next week and the week after. It strikes me we could, if we said every Wednesday evening, a group of people come together, talk about challenges, stresses, just kind of a facilitated doesn't even have to be a conversation, just a gathering to, would, for like-minded.
Thanks, Laura. Well, we need to kind of move around. We're getting very close to 12:30, so there are a couple things I wanted to cover. Not meaning you can't discuss what we've already discussed, but I would like us to pay some attention to, do we want to do more advertising? And what role does the online service that Jerry so dedicatedly provides for us, what role can that play in our outreach? Jerry mentioned last week that a couple that has started coming to church started coming here because they got us online and became excited about us because of online. So I'd like some conversation about online and also advertising. Take it away.
have been thinking about what George said way long time ago, and I'm just kind of brainstorming a bunch of possible ideas in terms of that might especially appeal to gay and lesbian, trans people. October 11th is National Coming Out Day. Early in December is AIDS Awareness Day. That's probably not the right name. History Month, and there's a couple of different history months. Trans Day of Awareness, something like that, in like March 31st, I think. The day after a legislation passes that would be harmful. You know, there's lots of possibilities, you know, if we put our heads together, that might or might not be welcoming to either queer people or people who have family members.
Yeah, I think the Gay Pride Parade was an excellent example of that.
And it was fun.
It was. So Facebook, don't post them very seldomly, but I check to see what my friends have posted. And last night I saw 2 different instances of looked like ads for New Song. I don't know who posted them, but I think, well, that's great. And I just pushed like, but if we saw that, if other people saw that on Facebook, when I saw it, I would just add a comment like, yeah, last Sunday we really talked about the gay and lesbian participation in something or other. Or last Sunday, I appreciated our discussion of current legislation, so that it was not just that picture, and we could have something cute or whatever, reclaiming something that had been done before in newspapers, but have it be on Facebook. More people use Facebook than you might think. More people are like me, I think, that just check it out to see what other people are doing.
But my daughter says people of her generation are protesting Facebook and not signing up.
Yeah, you can just look cross-post on Instagram and Blue Sky. We talked about this. When did we talk about it? I'm gonna redo the ad that Jim made for the choir program and put it on Facebook. And I already talked to Natalie about we need to have this conversation. Yeah, I'm happy to do the posting. And what I said was cross-post on Instagram and Blue Sky, so.
Not X?
No.
Let's do that.
I think that, that way of communicating to people about what's going on at New Song is really important. Like, we recently had the All Saints Day, event, and I think just little blurbs about what's happening on this Sunday, might, stimulate somebody to say, oh, I'd really like to participate in that and join. So I think our presence online, I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on any of that. I'm totally not on any of that. But I do realize that a lot of people are, and it's how they get information. And so I think that is really, really important for whoever takes on that task.
I do think we have something we could advertise, and that would include anybody who wanted to walk in the doors. We have a healing service every Sunday. We have someone who is behind the altar, so to speak, and who says a prayer for anyone who's suffering. And that could be anybody, couldn't it? And so I think, I don't know why we keep that such a secret. I mean, it's really a unique part of our congregation. Other little things we do that no other congregation necessarily does, like give each other the blessing when we go to take the bread and wine. So I think there are plenty of things out there.
I forgot to add, last week, John Whiston said he would love to have come up on Facebook every week. This is what got me thinking about it. Every day, a prayer or a scripture or something. And it occurred to me it'd be very easy to take the prayers of the people and just divide them up once a day and post. So
Jerry,
I'm happy to do all those things if somebody says, go ahead.
I'll say go ahead.
Jerry, is there a way that we could promote the online service more than we are?
Boosted on Facebook for a fee, and occasionally I have boosted it on Facebook through my account, and have never sent a bill to the church for it. But it is a way that it will go out to targeted markets, more or less, but it's a pretty broad market. So you can boost the service, like after the fact, I can hit boost and you send a fee of how many days you want to be boosted and how many people it will reach. There's about a list of about 30 or 40 people, I think, when I set it up for next week. There's a list where you can invite people that have come or that do come online and watch us. John Harper will talk about the two congregations, the online congregation and the in-person congregation sometimes. I'm not sure how that works totally, but there'll be a few people like him who now goes more Sundays than coming here in person. And there's some conversations about that. But yeah, you can boost a post on Facebook for a fee.
It's not expensive. If Jim's discernment is correct, that we need to have some kind of a group who's going to give Laura authority to post things and. Well, no, but I'm talking about a vestry nominated committee that Jim was talking about, a growth committee or some kind of a growth group. Jerry, you could present a budget or some ideas to that committee that we could then take to the vestry. Okay. All right, that's something I'm gonna put in the minutes. Okay. Anything else on advertising?
Well, we did have a more liberal approach when Nancy did some little village ads. Do you remember?
I think Jim was in charge of that, but yeah. We've done those.
What am I in charge of?
Little village ads. Little Village magazine. The Little Village magazine. I think we had ads there too.
We can move on to
Yeah, let's.
talk about the role of the priest.
Yeah, Jerry already said something very interesting about the role of the priest.
Just quickly on the advertising stuff. One, newspaper advertising. This is the generation that reads the newspaper. And so some of you may know that I recently got voted as the best realtor in Iowa City by the Press Citizen.
Yay, yay.
How, I didn't say that to brag. I'm saying why that happened. So I got a notice from the Press Citizen that I was a finalist. I had no idea what was going on, no idea who voted or whatever. But basically it was a pitch for them, for me to spend advertising money with them.
Sure.
And I think I do a very good job with what I do, but then I just thought my demographic is the demographic that still reads the paper. And so they probably were the ones that voted for me. I'd have no idea. But newspaper advertising, just does not happen very much anymore. And I don't know how effective that is. I may actually have a source because my designer did the bus ad things back in the day when I would take them to the Iowa City Bus Department. When they had space, they'd put them up in the then Coralville would put them up. And I can contact her to see if she still has the file of those ads that we used. They were clever and they were smart and they were funny and they were thought-provoking and catching. And that did bring some people to us back in the day. Facebook advertising is not expensive, and I have a few other ideas to work up for different our banner gets a little tired to me, so that's why I switched it to this banner. I'm one of the administrators on Facebook page that can do that. I think Lori Erickson might be the other. I don't know who else has access to it. You do? What?
Talk down the tube. Don't hold it that way. Okay, I won't.
So, what the other thing that Jerry does, and I think we just got one this week, was send out an amusing and lighthearted big postcard that you get, and talks about him as a realtor. And I think that if everybody would, if we could get those who could afford it, way postage is going up these days, to take 5 or 10, we could mail things around to people and get them to them in their homes and just say, I was thinking of you, and I think this might be interesting, and send it off to the neighbors or to the, I think those postcards are wonderful. Yeah, well, they're very clever and they're very appealing, and that seems to me something that we really could do.
Let's talk about the role of the priest. The expectations we have for a quarter-time priest who is already assigned responsibilities for running the service on Sunday mornings and for visiting the hospital, people in the hospitals. What do we have in mind for the role of the priest in terms of growth?
Well, I think a priest who is a particular kind of personality can reach out to people and really cement the relationship that person has with the church. But we still need to get people inside the door. So I don't think they are conflicting. I think we can start an advertising or promotion program independently of a search for a priest. And when a priest does come online, they can supplement that. I don't see any need to wait for a priest to come on board or to look for a priest who's going to organize us in a certain way, because that means we're calling on somebody to get us organized, and I think people would rather come to a place that's already organized.
My first principle is do no harm.
Yeah. Thank you, Laura, for your contributions. I think Jerry pointed out something that may be too much of a burden for a quarter-time priest, but that is to, once we come up with the ideas, to help us organize those ideas. And that's, if we can't find individuals in the church who are willing to do that, then maybe that is the priest's role.
I do remember that when Mel first came to Trinity, one of the first things he did was join the board of the shelter house. Now, whether that would count as part of the quarter time, but any community activities would be exposure for our growth.
I think Jim said something too, that is to hire somebody with a personality, an outgoing personality, who's going to be an attractive person rather than a putting off person. And we can use Mel and the most recent priest of the Episcopal Church in Trinity to be the opposite examples. In other words, we should pass on, in my opinion, from what Jim said, we should pass on to the discernment committee that we are looking for somebody who is friendly, outgoing, warm personality, who is going to be welcoming to people when they come in the door, and maybe community-minded. Go ahead, Esther.
Just a comment about organizing ourselves. I think Natalie is a great organizer, too. I think we can rely on her a little more than we have in the past. Just like her sending us the form this past week, noticing that needed to be done and proactively doing it. I think she can give us some pointers and pull together some of the ideas that we have.
Yes. Is there somebody who would like to volunteer to just say a quick prayer?
Oh, my. I'll do it.
Okay, Catherine.
Thank you, Lord, our God, Creator, that we have here congenial people who are thoughtful and able to go forward with your mission. We ask this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you all for coming. Appreciate your participation.
Extemporaneous don't do extemporaneous prayers too well.
Thanks, Catherine, for doing the prayer. Thank you. I'm not